I think we're about ready to begin. If you all are. My name's Dina Rick and I work for the Huffington Post. I'm going to be chairing this debate. Sorry. I'm going to be chairing this debate on politics in the age of social media, and we're going to be looking at how we can use social media to enhance public debate and engage voters and tell stories, and what we can learn from the masters of digital communication. And we have an extremely good panel. So to my right we have Mark Ferguson, editor of Labelist, writer and campaigner. And then we have Chris Yu, who's head of Policy Exchange Digital Government, and Stella Creasy, who will be joining us soon. And Simon Milner from Facebook, who is the Director of Public Policy in the UK and Ireland, and he joined Facebook in January. And finally, we have Alberto Nardelli from Fruitminster, who is the Fruitminster's founder. And basically everyone is going to have 5 to 7 minutes to speak, and then we'll open it up for questions. So Mark, do you want to go first?
What enthusiasm!
What's the point of social media? Very good question. I'm always very sick when people always say, is the next election going to be the social media election? I mean, do you think people in the sort of the 1950s went, oh, will the next election be the television election? I think it's a very odd way that we think about the way of producing content as being different. And there are things that are remarkably different about the way that social media works, about the way that social media produces content, the way that social media makes politicians interact with people. But do I think social media wins elections? No, not on its own. The internet can help win elections, do fundraising and organising tools, but no one is going to win or lose an election based upon their use of Twitter or, many apologies, Facebook for all. It's an absolutely fantastic organising tool. Where social media can have enormous difference is the ability of politicians to engage with ordinary people on their terms and make people realise that, contrary to popular opinion, most politicians are actually relatively nice, relatively normal human beings. I mean, there are obvious exceptions, which we won't get into here, but if anyone wants to see me in the Midland bar tonight, I can give you a short list. It's not that short. Yeah, not necessarily all of them are Tories either. But, I mean, there was someone made a very good point to me this morning when the news was coming here. They said Ed Miliband's speech today is going to be about Ed Miliband the person, the personal life of Ed Miliband, my story, Ed Miliband, what I get up to when I'm not, you know, shouting in a grey or black suit, like most people in this room, on TV in Westminster. What makes me tick, apart from some vague idea of blockbusters, Rubik's Cubes and Marks & Spencer's jumpers. Fact is, if Ed Miliband was better at social media, if Ed Miliband's tweets were actually written by Ed Miliband and not written in sort of bland, sort of, I had a wonderful meeting at the community centre today with Clive and Brenda. What good people they are. Here it is. I mean, some of the stuff is, I mean, a tweet like this, for example, about Malcolm Wicks, absolutely fine, expresses the right sentiment. But the fact is, if you only have those kind of completely po-faced, completely that has more of an impact when I see someone who I follow, where I hear them talk about the football match they've gone to, the TV programmes they're watching, you know, the sort of mad things their kids say, the mad things their parents say. That kind of thing has much more resonance for me, because it's like, this is someone I feel sort of an emotional connection through social media with, as clearly lost someone who's close to them. Now, politics isn't there yet. Politics isn't going to be there for a while, but what we are starting to see is politicians coming through, becoming more senior, so that it's not inconceivable that the next Labour leader, the next but one Labour leader, the next Tory leader, could be someone who is comfortable in social media, who's grown up in a social media environment. You know, the 2010 intake of Labour MPs do not particularly differentiate between getting a story out on Twitter, on Facebook, or issuing a press release. They don't particularly think of it any differently if they're writing an article for the New Statesman or writing for Labelist. And that's sort of breaking down the barriers between old media and new media is quite interesting, I think, as well. But basically, for me, the main thing is, like, Ed Miliband is a nice guy, and people don't get to see that enough. Like, he's very engaging in person. He's brilliant at holding the attention of even up to 100, 200 people in the room. He may well go and surprise me and absolutely wipe the floor with everyone this afternoon and amaze thousands of people and millions at home on TV. But actually, for someone like Ed Miliband, who is a bit geeky, but it's fine, who, you know, does use words like pre-distribution, but it's fine, because he's actually a nice person, because people can believe in him and trust him if they know him. Social media is made for him. But unfortunately, like most politicians, he hasn't embraced it properly. So there we go. That sounded a bit bleak, didn't it? On the internet.
No, it's great. And then we can clap at the end. And also, I should say that the hashtag is social media. So, and now Chris.
Okay, so I'm Chris Yu. I run the digital government team at Policy Exchange. So I look after our research on technology, data, and the internet. And really just a few observations from me on social media, this whole web thing, and how it's affecting politics. So we all know that the web, email, all of this is really radically changing the way that we communicate with each other. No doubt about that. And even actually from the very early days on Facebook, I remember when I set up my profile years back, you filled in your name, but there was also a box saying what's your political affiliation, and you could type it in and you could freestyle. So it's been there right from the beginning. And we now have organisations like Yatterbox, who are here with us today, popping up to help us analyse the data that's coming out, run the metrics, understand who's talking about what and how influential they are. And as you were saying, this point about authenticity really seems to matter. It's pretty glaringly obvious sometimes when a press officer is tweeting, and it's pretty clear as well when someone is actually spreading a message that they care about that's authentic. So all of that, it's real. I think there are some issues which people need to watch out for, and I'm just going to put down 3 and then we can explore them in the conversation at the end of this session. So first for me is, although Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter is terribly exciting, it's important to get the basics on the internet right as well. Simple things like websites and emails still matter. One of the things that I did when I was preparing for this session is I looked up my MP's website, and I like to think that I'm reasonably politically active and I'm reasonably technologically in tune. I confess I hadn't looked up my MP's website before this year's round of party conferences, but I thought I'll have a go. Googled him, found his site. It's all there. It's not the most spectacularly shiny website ever, but it's functional. Hi, Stella. Not up to the standards of some of the cutting-edge web experiences that we have, but you know, seems okay. And I scroll down to the bottom of the page, and there's a big rider across the bottom, and it says, of course, there are no members of Parliament because the general election has been called, and MPs will be back in the House after the 6th of November 2010, 6th of May 2010, sorry. Which made me wonder, does the person in charge of the website, how much attention are they paying to it, and therefore how much actually are they bothered about my impression when I visit this page? So get the basics right. The second is just, you know, I remain a little bit sceptical about some of the, particularly the microblogging services. So they feel like they're a fantastic medium for conversations about events as they happen. And maybe some of you are tweeting about this conversation right now. They work particularly well when they hang off an event at a physical location or maybe a virtual event. Lots of people tweeting about Newsnight or whatever's on TV. You know, I kind of wonder about the permanence of those conversations. So topics trend and then die out really fast. I wonder whether actually, as a place for substantive debate about issues, that's the right medium. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm sure some of you will have views on that. And then the third thing that I think bears a bit of merits a bit of attention is around what's happening with all of the data that we generate. So every time that you like a product or you browse a web page, all of these data being hoovered up somewhere, and the kind of big data assets that are generated can be analysed, can be broken down, and are fantastic vehicles for targeting messages, segmenting the population, understanding how am I going to rally my support, how am I going to provoke turnout, and so on. But that very fine-grained detail about individuals, gets us into some interesting questions around what that does to political messaging. If it's right that actually the best way to increase turnout is to push all of someone's anger points, and the best way to build a lot of traction on social media is to go for issues which polarize the debate, then on the one hand you brought lots of people in, which is great. On the other hand, maybe we're starting to damage our ability to have deep discourse in society, and some people would say it's damaging our ability to find compromise. And that's really, I guess, a symptom of a bigger effect, which people describe as the filter bubble, which you'll have, I'm sure many people have heard of. And it boils down to, if I follow all the people on social media that I tend to agree with, and if search engines return to me the kind of things which they think I will be interested in, how can I really be sure that I'm getting a proper balanced understanding of what's going on out there? So there we are. So 3 challenges: get the basics right, figure out what this micro-blogging thing is for, and think hard about all of the data that's being generated and how it's impacting us. And maybe just for the what it feels like for people practicing this stuff. It feels to me like the best world is the one where we engage on social media, where we're authentic, where we step up to the issues. For me, the second best is the world in which we ignore it all. And the third best is the one where it's half-hearted and actually you log onto someone's Twitter page and there's tumbleweed blowing across it.
Alberto?
Right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what's changed in terms of Twitter and political communications over the past couple of years. So, to give you some context, when we launched Tweetminster back in 2008, there were 4 MPs on Twitter, 5 if you include Michael Green. And there are now over 360 MPs using Twitter. So you can see great change in a fairly short period of time. And it's not just politicians. When we launched, there weren't many journalists on Twitter. Most news organizations would have a Twitter account linked to an RSS feed. There were about 1.5 million people on Twitter in the UK back in early 2009. There are now over 10 million people using Twitter within the UK. So I think the first element is that Twitter is much bigger than most of us think. It's much bigger than the people that we engage with, than the people that we follow, the people that we have conversations on. There are lots of small groups, individuals, maybe have 50, 100 followers, who will be talking about issues amongst themselves. So it's a very large, much larger platform than we think. And I was asked to write an article a couple of weeks ago on how Twitter had changed between the US elections. And I started thinking about some of the work that we've done in 2008 and 2009, like mapping where candidates were campaigning, looking at sentiment analysis and studying correlations between mentions and election results, and to see what had changed over the past couple of years. And realize that in terms of product development, not much had actually changed. The big difference, the big innovation, was the fact that Twitter has become mainstream. So that consolidation of Twitter as a platform, especially as a communications platform, and the fact that you very rarely now hear questions such as, is it useful? What's the point of tweeting about what I had for lunch and talking about this and that issue? It just is. It's part of the conversation. And I think various trends have emerged which characterize it as a communications platform over the past couple of years. The first is in terms of news monitoring. So a very large number of people will use Twitter as a platform to monitor news. It's one of the first things that they look at in the morning. It's one of the last things they look at in the evening to see what's happening. Before going onto a newspaper site, sometimes before going onto the BBC. And lots of these users aren't interacting, just looking at it as a news stream. And that in itself, a very simple thing, has very profound implications, because what we read on that stream will shape public opinion. What we don't read on that stream won't reach members of the public. So the fact that it's used as a news stream has very practical consequences. The second element is amplification. I think one of the most powerful things of Twitter is the fact that it amplifies things very, very quickly. It amplifies news very quickly. So someone shares a story, and very quickly that story gets retweeted 100 times. Someone takes a link and puts it on Facebook or the other way around, and very quickly that story is spreading across the news, picked up by other news outlets, picked up by individuals. And to give one example, when we post something as Tweetminster, about 90% of activity happens in less than 5 minutes. Again, that has very practical implications, because if you're on the receiving end of a news story, the time that you have to react to that story shrinks, because people will make up their mind very, very quickly. Very quickly, that story will be all over the place. So your time to react to a story, to try and shape the way people are receiving that story, suddenly becomes much, much smaller. And if you're within an organization which is very hierarchical, like for example a political party where you need to ask for permission before reacting to a story and get sign-off, sometimes it can be too late. By the time you react to something, people will have already made up their mind. And that leads to a third element, which is very specific, I think, to Twitter. The fact that when something happens and it becomes a trending topic, in that moment it seems like the most important thing in the world. But sometimes it's the most important thing in the world for 3 minutes. Then people shift to something else. It shows very, for bad and sometimes for good reasons, it shows the fact that we now have very short attention spans. We focus on an issue for a very short period of time and then we move on to something else. And that, in terms of implications, it's all about judgment. Judging if whatever it is that's trending in that moment will be important in an hour's time, in half an hour's time, tomorrow, in a week, let alone in a month. And so that shapes the way you react to a story. Something could trend and in 5 minutes or half an hour it could be gone. And if you react to it, it could actually stay, and so there are consequences to that too. Another element is, I think, the influence that Twitter has in terms of mainstream media, and not just in terms of the influence it has in terms of as a source of information, but also in terms of shaping the way mainstream media covers events. So, for example, finding sources, guests for programs, or guest writers for newspapers or blogs, etc. So what happens on Twitter doesn't stay on Twitter. It has an impact on media across the spectrum. And finally, I think in terms of the ability of social media to create a level playing field, and I don't mean that in a democratic sense, I mean that in a sense that anyone can be an expert in something. Again, sometimes it's a good reason, because you can find an expert opinion around a very specific niche topic and connect with that on Twitter or on Facebook or on other platforms. And sometimes, though, you very easily have individuals who aren't actually experts, but they tweet about everything, and lots of people pay attention to what they tweet about. And I think all of this brings up various challenges. So in addition to the challenges that I mentioned before, I think at the heart of it all is an element of judgment, understanding what matters, understanding how to intervene, understanding when to intervene, and there's also, I think, an element, as Mark mentioned, of personality. So people expect the use of social media to be authentic and genuine. That's a complete shift in terms of communication. So the challenge of communicating in a much more personal way. One final element, which I think is very strongly linked to social media, is the notion of history and memory. So when you say something on Twitter, or you share something on Facebook, or a video of you is put on YouTube, it's there forever. And in political terms, that has very profound implications, because someone may say something in 2-3 years' time, and someone may take a video and say, look at what you said 3 years ago. And that video gets shared by hundreds of thousands of people. Previously, prior to social media, you had bits of this when you might have a newspaper article, but I think in terms of the reach and the impact of that, the notion of memory will have very profound implications on politics over time. Thank you.
And our next speaker is going to be Stella Creasy, who is a shadow minister, shadow crime prevention minister, and the MP for Walthamstow.
Thank you, Dina. I shall stop sending rude and abusive tweets to Mark. So if someone else could take up that job for me, that would be proper crowdsourcing. I come at this debate from a slightly different angle, I think, to some of the other people on the panel, because I come at firstly as somebody, and I'm very disappointed that there is not a category on there for talking about indie music, because a lot of my tweets are about indie music. I come at this as a campaigner first. I got involved in using online mediums, not just Twitter, but Facebook, and email, which maybe seems a bit old-fashioned, perhaps to some of you on the platform. As a campaigner, as an activist in my local community, I've carried on using them as an MP, and I think one of the things I'm very, very mindful of is that it's very easy to see new forms of technology as somehow the magic bullet that will resolve some of the deeper challenges and deeper cultural issues that we have to deal with in terms of political engagement and political participation. And that's how you end up with MPs with several different accounts, or indeed people tweeting their press releases. For me, I think that's quite disrespectful for some of the ways in which social change happens, and therefore some of the things that we, as people who want to achieve social change, because that's why all of us go into politics, need to think about how we use these forms of technology, how we use the capacity that these forms of technology offer us to communicate and connect and engage with people. You know, I should do an award for it, I should do a hashtag for it, some of the sort of trite things I've seen about the Arab Spring and how that was all to do with Twitter. And you sort of think, no, that's all to do with wanting democracy and freedom, and the point at which we forget that is the point at which we misunderstand what was happening there. I also think there's a real danger in that any forms of these technologies can either enhance or restrict the kind of debate, the kind of connection, the kind of engagement that you can have with people, either locally, nationally, or indeed internationally. The thing I always learned about Twitter, and why I like Twitter perhaps more than Facebook, I do apologise, is that you had to be, it wasn't a broadcast medium, it was an interactive medium. So actually the way in which you used it had to be about the connection, about the engagement with people. I remember the sort of shocked look on the face of some of my colleagues when I said, well look, I follow everybody who talks about Walthamstow on Twitter, because 90% of those people are local residents, so actually it allows me to start a conversation with them about our local community and what's going on. And it hadn't occurred to people that you could do that. It hadn't occurred to people that you could have that kind of connection. The thing I think that online forums allow us to do is to speed up the pace of rebuilding a relationship with people about why change matters and how they can be part of it. It doesn't make that happen, but it speeds up that relationship. And the thing I sort of find quite interesting is that there's clearly a connection between being involved online and then being involved offline. And what I do online, I do offline too. So there isn't a division in the way in which I work as an MP in terms of the things that you might see me do on Twitter or on Facebook or with the e-newsletter that goes out every week to 4,500 people in my local community, and the community meetings, the issues, the ways in which I work at a local level. That's because the biggest lesson for me about any form of communication, any form of engagement, is that it's about purpose first. So that point about democracy and freedom, about why is it that people would engage? What is it that they get out of being part of what you do, that they are interested in, that makes them want to be part of it, that makes them continue not just to retweet your messages, but also help you in your local community. And in that sense, not having a purpose means that the greatest technology you can use, the most whizzy technology you can use, is never going to engage people. And the best example I know of this is the Kony 2012 stuff, which everyone got very, very excited about. Said, oh look, millions of people are sharing this video. And there was something like 19,000 people who said that they would turn up to a poster campaign in Australia, and 25 did. Now actually, frankly, some of the meetings that I get involved in the local community, if 25 people turned up, we'd be thinking, it's brilliant. But it does speak to a disjuncture between perhaps some of the expectations, which I think are fed by this sense that there must be a silver bullet out there, there must be a magic wand that we can wave that will somehow rejoin all these people who are interested in politics with the political process overnight. The honest reality is that doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that you can't use these technologies, but I think it means that you have to have that sense of purpose at the heart of what you do. Because also, one of the things I'm very mindful of is it's better not to engage at all than to engage badly. If I said the word blackbusters, you'd know exactly what I mean. But I also think it's the same in government too. I mean, the best example of this for me was the government consultation about what their priorities should be, which generated all sorts of random abuse and a great recipe for beef casserole. It's like, if you don't know why you're engaging with people, it's the same as if you were to organise a public meeting in your local community and wonder why people will come and shout at you, because you haven't got clarity of purpose about what their participation will do and the difference that it will make. Having said all of that, I absolutely passionately believe that online forums of engagement, in the same way I believe that offline forums of engagement can be transformative, that is the future not just of democratic accountability but actual social change, both at a local and a national level. And one of the passions that I have is to challenge those people who are talking about democratic engagement and disconnection and say, as somebody who has campaigned for electoral reform for most of my political career, the future of democratic engagement has to be about public service reform, because it has to be about people having that sense of efficacy about what we do. And in that sense, the ways in which technology allow us to have those conversations about the kind of public services we want to have in the future, and also the role that people can play in them, need to go well beyond thinking about, well, great, I can tweet my MP, or I can find out about a public service and when there might be a meeting. It has to be about how does technology allow us to have shared discussions and make shared choices, and then shared collaboration to achieve those goals. I see it in my local community in Walthamstow. You might have seen the hashtag that we use, AwesomeStow, which has actually generated... Yeah, you're laughing?
I like it.
Yeah. But what AwesomeStow does is it not only draws people together, so that starts that conversation about the kind of place that we live in, and frankly building a culture that it's worth getting involved in our local community, that it has something worth fighting for. It then generates activism offline, and whether that has been people helping with our local night shelter, people helping post the riots. You might have seen some of the work we did during the riots, where we not only got information out to people about where there were problems locally and how they could help, but also organised a respite centre for the local police, and we ended up serving 250 hot meals every single day for a week for our local police from a standing start. That started online, but it carried on offline because people understood the purpose and they understood the role that they could play in it. Those relationships have continued, and indeed one of my responsibilities, I believe, as the local MP, is to continue to build those relationships, because that in itself is a resource for our local community. It's a model for me about how social change occurs. It's a model for me about how then, when I'm looking at the future of what social change should be in my local community, we need to work with. And in that sense, when you build technology into it, you can speed up that pace of change. You can speed up the pace of connection with people so they can start talking about the kind of services they want. Another great example of this is the work that we've done on sexual healthcare services in Walthamstow, which again has been organised on and offline. And that's about what kind of service do we need in the future in an area that doesn't have one. I think, therefore, there needs to be a note of caution when people are kind of get very excited about how people are using technology, because the risk is we miss out that important lesson about purpose. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from today is I will bang on and on about purpose, because that's the test I think you should hold all of us to in terms of the time and effort and engagement we use. If I can't explain to you, online or offline, why you should participate, then it ain't going to work. The fact that I can tweet you about it means I can speed up that process, but it's still a purpose question. And I think Albert is absolutely right to talk about anger. It's very easy to get people angry very quickly. I always used to say when I was a local councillor, if I want to start a community group, I'll just tell everyone there's going to be a mobile phone mast at the bottom of their road, and within a week we would have the same thing happens online. Real change, real participation, deep engagement, and actually deep empowerment that you can get takes longer, and it takes that sense of purpose and clarity and that willingness to work in those ways. My honest experience so far is that that makes politics worth doing. Because actually, for me, working with my local community and now working at a national level on things, you can see the power of the change that you can generate. And in that sense, I'm hugely excited by what social media offers us to do that. I just recognise it's not about the media, it is absolutely about the message. So, thank you.
And finally, Simon, Director of Policy at Facebook in the UK and Ireland.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, Stella, when I laughed, I was actually thinking about the connection between Walthamstow and Facebook, which I never really
I'm going to hunt you down on Twitter. I'm going to tell people that you're
in that, yesterday, Facebook launched its annual staff survey, and in Facebook, typically it's called the Awesomeness Survey. So you have Awesomesstow, we have awesomeness. I'm really delighted to be here, and I know you're chomping at the bit to ask questions, so I'll be brief. As is often the way with party conferences, one tends to move from one town on the south coast of England to, frankly, a much more interesting city in the north of England, and talk about the same things. And last week, when I was on a panel on a similar issue, I really talked about this from the perspective of a political activist. So how should a political activist approach Facebook, and provided some tips around that. And I'm very happy to talk about that in terms of questions. But actually, it felt to me that the thing I was missing, and the one other thing I'd like to talk about today, and kind of to match Stella's purpose, is to talk about people. Because actually that's what Facebook's all about. It's all about people, and in our case it's about half the UK population, just around 30 million people who are active users of Facebook, and most of those people are using Facebook every single day, and increasingly on one of these. on a smartphone, and that's just increasing all the time. And those people who are using Facebook on a smartphone are much more engaged than those who are using it on a desktop, because it's integrated into everything that they do. And I suppose one thing that I was thinking through really is, well, okay, so what's different about being active on a social network and just being online? What is it about this particular aspect of the digital universe that matters? Why is it any different from browsing or emailing or what have you? I think the key thing I would describe it as, it's a bit like the offline world, is that on a social network, you, the individual user, are at the center of it. Okay? Whereas often when you're online, it feels like you're from the outside going in. That's not what it's like on Facebook. You're in the middle. Your Facebook experience is unique to you. Nobody else has the same experience. Even if they have the same likes and interests, their experience will be different because of the nature of the network they've built around themselves. On Facebook, the massive majority of people, and anyone who wants to get anything out of it, is their authentic self. We have a rule that says you have to be yourself, and we will chuck people off who aren't if we're notified about them. And the reason for that is authenticity brings genuine conversations. And that's why the great majority of people on Facebook are only connected with people they actually know in the real world. Typically people who live near them, and therefore that's one of the reasons why Facebook works particularly when it comes to local campaigns, because typically the great bulk of your friends will be within easy reach of you, even if you don't see them very often. And people are engaging in an open and connected way, whether that's about with each other, and there's an awful lot of the communication that happens on Facebook is with other people you know, telling them about what you're up to, organising to meet up, messaging each other, but they're also engaging in an open and connected way with campaigns, with indie bands that they love, with apps, with news sources, and with politics. And when I said when they're engaging in an open and connected way, the key thing is that when they engage with something, their friends find out about it. So every time a Facebook user connects with their local MP, or a campaign, or a national issue, whether they like it or they post a comment about it, that generates a story which is shared with their friends. And when those friends react to that story, it's shared again. So that's the amplification that you get from a social network, which you just don't get in a non-social network online environment in such a straightforward way. And it happens seamlessly. So this is not about people saying, I want to share it with all my friends. It just happens in terms of how Facebook works. And that means you get this incredible scale effect from an individual action on Facebook, which is something frankly you just don't get in other realms of communication and connection, and certainly in the political way. And typically on Facebook, this happens in a highly positive way. There is no dislike button on Facebook, and that's that's absolutely about our ethos. We want to make the world more open and connected, and we want people to engage in a positive way, and that's what people mainly do. Not always, but they mainly do. And you can see what works. So if you are, in terms of if you're running a page as a party or as an MP or an activist or around a campaign, you can see how people are reacting to the things that you are posting from the insights that we offer, all for free in terms of how Facebook works. And therefore you can tell, well actually, if I post something on a Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, it's much less likely that people will interact with that than if I post it on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. If I post something which is just a news story without a photo, it's much less likely people will react to that than if I post something which is an attractive photo. And you think about it, that's actually how we engage generally. Make your things more interesting, people will engage more if you do it in a timely way. So that's why the fact that David Cameron has 171,000 fans on Facebook and Ed Miliband has 15,000 is a problem, actually, for the Labour Party and for the Labour leader. It means when he posts something, actually he doesn't get anything like the scale effect that David Cameron will do. To be fair, though, the Labour Party itself has 130 fans on Facebook. By the way, they're not friends, the Labour Party, they are fans, and therefore it's not as if the Labour Party has to accept them as friends. And nor does Ed have to do that, so he can post them as fans. A couple of little facts or kind of thoughts to share with you in wrapping up. I was recently in Dublin at an event for small businesses, and Richard Bruton, the jobs minister there, spoke about Facebook and described how he thinks about it as politically. And he described the notion of if you're running a campaign, you can either print 10,000 leaflets, get lots of volunteers out on the streets, putting those leaflets through people's doors, and you might get a handful of people who will react to that and engage in a positive way. If you do something successful on Facebook, you might get one person initially. But if that one person is then sharing it with their 120 friends, and that's a typical Facebook user, and then those 120 friends are engaging, before you know it, you can reach 10,000 people, providing it's the right kind of content and it's done authentically. A fact for you from some research done in the US from the Pew Center. They've done research that shows that you're 57% more likely to influence somebody's vote if you're connected with them on Facebook than if you're connected with them by any social network. So I guess I'd conclude by saying you tweet if you want to, but if you really want to engage with people in an authentic way, do it on Facebook. Think about things before you post. Don't do it in 5 minutes. Think about it. Maybe you might do it once a week, but if your post is terrific once a week and people engage with that, that'll have much more impact for you as a politician or a campaigner than anything else you might do that week. Thanks very much.
Fantastic, thank you. And I can tell you that the Huffington Post gets a lot more traffic from Facebook than Twitter, if that's interesting to anyone apart from me.
It's very interesting.
So, just going to open it up to the floor, and the rule is you say your name, where you're from, and it has to be a question. And if you want to ask anything of Mark Ferguson, ask him now because he has to dash off for Ed's speech.
You're so right.
But
I know my place.
I don't know where you're watching it. So does anyone have any questions? You?
Yeah. Tom Chivers from Bath, Labour Party member, also a undergraduate in media communications. And doing
just tweeted you.
Yes. Yes, and doing a dissertation on political blogging and social networking. My question is to do with the level of trust that people have in Twitter, where you said that it's not about the media, it's the message. Now, our lecturers ran down our throat a saying by Marshall McLuhan, which is, the media is the message. And I believe that is the case with some people, where they know that politicians aren't being quite genuine in their use of Twitter yet. They're sort of people have moved on in how they use Twitter. They understand that it's more about connecting with as many people as possible, whereas they feel that politicians are just using this as a platform. And I was wondering what the panel thought about, the trust between people witnessing politics happen on Twitter and how politicians intend it to be.
I think there's lots of questions in there. I think one element which I like a lot about Twitter is because lots of people sometimes do post too quickly, they sometimes say things which if they thought about it for a long time, they probably wouldn't post. I think what I'm trying to say is that it's someone's genuine character, the way they actually are, eventually on Twitter comes out. Maybe they reply to someone, maybe they post something during the Olympic opening ceremony that they shouldn't post. And that's one of the elements which I think...
Even if Coldplay are shit, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about the opening ceremony. And I think that's one of the elements which is linked a lot to the platform. So even very controlled individuals, their true personality, even if eventually comes out, even if they're boring, I think that shows that from a personality perspective, they're excessively cautious. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes.
Can I, because I don't think it's any fun as a fringe meeting unless people disagree. I want to pick up Simon's point about reach and your point, Tom, because that's why I think actually it's a red herring to think about technology. The point about authenticity is absolutely true, but it's the same in person as it is online, and that's why I say actually we've got to think about the message, we've got to think about why people would engage. Simon, you talk a lot about reach, but reach, frankly, I think this is the issue that 38 Degrees have, which is you can have a lot of people connected to you, but actually, what does that really mean? What does that actually get you to? And if you're in the business of social change, which is what I'm in, then the question is how do you turn reach and contact into connection and engagement and participation? And so I use Facebook as well, and I do different things on Facebook that I do on Twitter, but all the time I'm asking myself, what is the consequence? What is the thing I'm trying to get out of this? What is the relationship, the action I'm trying to engender with what I say? Even if, it's about people having a sense of what you are doing and why it matters and why you've chosen to divide your time like that. I mean, one of the things that I'm very conscious of as an MP, and it's really interesting, I think it is a reflection perhaps of being very open, and I think that's one of the things about your issue about trust is, I use these forums, I say the things online that I would say offline, but it does mean that people have a sense of who I am, and for good or bad. But I'm always very clear with people that I stood as Labour and I stood for Walthamstow. I didn't stand as Stella. So actually, what they need to understand is my motivation, and they need to understand the message, the participation, what I'm asking them to do. Both because that's how you get things done, but also that's for me the new level of accountability. So you can have a big reach, but very little activism. Or you can have a meaningful relationship with people. No, it's not that the two are mutually exclusive, but they're different purposes for what you're doing. And I think the other thing I'm very conscious of is that your model kind of presumes that we expect people to come to us. I don't frankly use my page on Facebook that much. I go out and I find where people in Walthamstow are connecting, and I go, because I'm a local resident. And actually what I really want people to know is the reason why I do all of this is because I get this as our home. We want to work together to do things. So I don't wait for people to come to me. I go to where they are. I'm not unique in doing that, and that's your point about, I think politics is changing because people are responding to the technology, and there's a difference, I would, if I'm honest, between people who I call digital immigrants and people who are digital natives. And I class myself as a digital immigrant in that, you know, we've come to these technologies and we're using them in different ways, but I know in 5 or 6 years' time it will be different because people will be much more comfortable, that it will be an inevitable part of it. So that's a relative support by the use of Twitter, and then the mediums will change again. The message stays constant, and if the message is about purpose and values and participation, then it doesn't matter what technologies you come to. I'm always excited by new technologies, but ultimately you can see a chord that runs between the message at the start and the message that continues, because that's why I stand and why I do what I do and why the party does what it does.
Okay, thank you.
Simon, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I wasn't going to come in given this was really about trust and Twitter, but obviously I want to engage in a productive and positive way with the things you're saying and stuff, which is, I mean, I suppose I was talking less about reach and more about word of mouth at scale. And I think that's what social networks allow you to do. So it's not necessarily about it's not the fact you can reach, not just the fact you can reach hundreds and not thousands of people, it's the fact you don't reach them, their friends reach them. And they say, actually, I'm really impressed by this campaign that Stella is running in Walthamstow. We should support it. And even if, so it's about that kind of the scale effect that we can do, which is not just about the numbers you reach, it's about the fact that it's friends who are doing it. But, I mean, the one thing you can't do on Facebook yet is vote. However, in some US states you can register to vote, and we've seen that campaigns based on Facebook can increase the number of people who will vote, typically from people who would not otherwise engage with the political process. You can't donate your organs through Facebook, but you can register the fact you want to be an organ donor, and you can tell your friends about it through Facebook. You can't actually physically stop bullying in the real world, but you can make a pledge that you want to stop bullying, and you can show the bullies that actually most right-thinking people want to try and will act when they see that in action. So there are lots of things you can engage people in. And actually, I think I'd encourage you to go back to your page. It's not about people coming to your page. It's about people realizing that actually you are letting them know about your personality, what you're into, whether that's about the latest band that you're seeing, or whether that's about a particular issue you're debating. And it's not them coming to you, they won't come to your page. Once they've liked your page, once they subscribe to you, they'll get something in their news feed which will tell them what's going on, and then they'll engage with you. So I encourage you to have another look.
Just a quick point.
A really quick point on reach. I think it's, when we talk about reach, it's very important to consider the way we measure stuff. Personally, I think the dichotomy between on and offline media is a false one. To give you a practical example, yesterday was an election in Georgia. We posted a video on our account from Georgian television which was showing police raiding one of the polling stations. The BBC saw the tweet, took the video, put it on the BBC. How many people did that reach? It's very hard to measure when you look just, if you're measuring things just in likes or just in number of retweets, because you have that link between new and old media which takes things off, say, Twitter or Facebook and brings them onto mainstream media, reaching many, many more people. I would always keep that in mind when looking at things like reach.
Fantastic. And does anyone have any more questions? And do you two have to go?
No, I was I was being participative. I was allowing Mark to speak.
Do you want to speak, Mark?
Sorry. Hanging on here if you will.
Just to sort of slightly restate the point from before, I mean, there are over 100 Labour MPs on Twitter, but there are only 10 I actually care about, and that's because they're the 10 authentic ones. Quite often. When you started bullying on Twitter during the panel session, but no, like, there's absolutely no point in. It's like with my sort of journalist-ish hat on. If I get a press release that I know is just a generic press release, it's just pumped out at me with absolutely no consideration of what my interests are, what my readership is, what the style of work I do is, I don't give a toss. And it's absolutely the same in a completely different scale for Twitter. If people are just pumping out, Aidan Burley, unsurprisingly, is one of the worst MPs on Twitter. Not just because he's an absolutely phenomenal prick, but also because he does that awful syndicated RSS feed, like Aidan's weekly report.
His newsletter never seems to mention the interesting stuff he gets up.
No, well, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, here's a roundup of my media clippings from last week. Don't lie. It's like, it's so spectacularly authentic. And actually, I mean, you know, maybe that's a warning to some MPs, is that if you are going to be...
Sorry, Aidan discusses odour problems with the anaerobic digestive. He's got me.
How many
I think this is his current one. His normal one's got one of him looking very serious in Parliament, which incidentally, if you check his parliamentary record, is not a place he spends a lot of time. Anyway, biggest swing to Conservatives and Labour in the country. I imagine it'll be quite a big swing back the other way next time.
Anyway.
But he is also an example of where if MPs are going to be authentic and they're going to say things which are unpopular, you have to be willing to back it up. And fair play to him, and this is the only time he's ever going to get any credit from me, he fronted up his pretty appalling views about the Olympics. He went on TV and said, no, I actually do believe this, completely. No, I'm a horrible human being and I'm going to take this moment of national celebration to piss on everyone's chips. But fair play to him, and he's got away with it. And I think if he'd gone all mealy-mouthed and, oh, I'm sorry, bowing and scraping, and then someone found something else he'd said that was very similar from a few weeks beforehand, which knowing Aidan Burley's definitely run his mouth in public about this recently, then he would have been toast. So authenticity can keep you out of trouble as well as get you into trouble.
I want to come back on what Simon said again, because
can we ask the members of the audience what they want to ask, guys?
He's wrong.
You can talk afterwards. Okay, yeah. You gentlemen in the front and gentlemen in the back, who I'm sort of looking at. Yeah.
I was just wondering what the panel thought about the role of social media and voter participation. You know, it continues to go down. So in that sense, social media potentially failed.
And you?
Stuart O'Dowd from Movement for Change. I just want to ask each person on the panel what they think the best campaign they've seen use social media has been. And you can't say Obama, or Movement for Change, or
Mark's
Stella.
saying Stella.
Stella can't say Stella.
No, legal within the Labour Party, legal unsharking has been as good as anything. But the other one would be a completely different kind of thing. Tom Watson kept phone hacking live online for 18 months when no one else gave a toss.
But also, why do you think they're the best ones?
Why? Well, phone hacking crashed a major British newspaper. So you can't get much bigger than that. And legal loan sharking has gone from absolutely nowhere. Part of it, of course, is the fact that we're in a recession, so it keeps on getting worse. So these things start appearing on every single high street. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a political issue 18 months ago, and now it very much is.
And has social media failed in political engagement? You do a lot of political engagement stuff. What do you think?
In people voting at elections, principally.
Yeah.
I think social media, in a way. So at the moment, right, you've got an MP and being an MP. But generally, what happens is, apart from national trends, you will start with a small majority and you'll build it up over time, so that you get people being elected first with sort of 500 majorities. People think it was a marginal seat, but there's an incumbency factor that builds up because of what it was: local press, local media, local TV. Now I think social media has potentially a much more laser-like ability. Even if you're not particularly interested in politics, you may end up coming across your MP on Twitter, coming across your MP on Facebook, even if you don't watch TV, right? Or you don't read the local newspapers. And I think that has a capacity, potentially in future, to mean that what we get is we get people actually starting off with quite big majorities, because people can engage directly without having to use a filtered medium.
Can we just do a hands up? How many of you engage with your local MP on social media? Oh wow.
My son is the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, so she doesn't tend to reply to my tweets anymore.
Just on this point about engagement and participation, I think But my take on this is that it's too soon to call it, but it goes one of two ways. So either, as you say, we bump into our MPs or other people on Facebook or Twitter or wherever it is, and we find out they are real people and they are interested in real issues that matter to us, and we build a relationship, and that is the thing which does actually do wonders for re-engagement. Or we bump into these people online and we discover actually, you know what, it's not them, it's the press officer that's tweeting, or their website hasn't been updated for 2 years, or you know, take your pick. And actually you thought, well, you know, I was kind of unsure before, now I know that actually no one is listening to me, no one is really that bothered about the messages they're pushing at me, and you know what, I'm going to switch off even more. I don't know, I hope this doesn't come to that, but I suspect there are places in the country where it's going that way.
And quickly, best campaign that you've seen?
I think it'd be insidious to pick one out, but what I suggest you do is look at the Facebook politics page on Facebook, which has some great stories about people using Facebook for politics.
And Alberto?
Super quick on voter participation, blame the product, not social media. On campaigns, I think the camera posters. The airbrush camera posters.
Oh yeah, that was a really good
In terms of the reach that they had and the way that they were covered by all the papers, they were picked up in the newspapers around the world, I think they were very, very
effective. And then for those people who need to go to Ed Speech, now is a good time to go. And then, does anyone else have any questions? Go on.
So I really want to answer a question about because actually again, I disagree. I think at the last election, I picked up at least a couple of hundred votes on Twitter. It was partly because it was a new medium then comparatively for people to engage in, partly because I was following people and I was talking about, I also picked up volunteers in that way. How many I might get if I get to stand at the next election, I don't know, but it is possible to do. It's just important to think about why it's not to do with Twitter, it was to do with the things that we were doing and I was doing with Twitter. And that's when you talk about what the stuff you're talking about, Simon, that to me is third-party advocacy. Yeah. So I know that my newsletter is successful in Walthamstow because I get complaints from residents, they've had it forwarded to them several times. But I also get people in my local community saying to me, oh yes, so-and-so told me about you on the street. It's not, and then that's why my constant message to people is if you think it's about the platform, you won't use the platform to help you do what you're trying to do. It's like the local media point. To be honest, I don't really do very much in my local media. My poor local paper has one reporter covering the entire borough. He's pretty stretched. He's out, he doesn't even have an office. So it's quite hard to kind of have a meaningful relationship with him. I do a lot of stuff online that then gets picked up by them, but also we do stuff at a very, very grassroots level. And if I stopped doing either or, I wouldn't be able to achieve the changes I'm trying to achieve. Because actually, I engage for a purpose, not for a presence. Do you see the difference that I make? So I just caution people of thinking that having a presence, having reach, having people following you is the bomb, is kind of what you're trying to do. It's actually about engagement and advocacy, and that is a metric you can set, is how many people would say, well actually, yeah, I think this person's doing a good thing, and that's, but it's also, for me, it's about how many people would then get involved.
Yeah. On this issue about voter engagement and social media, I think it's way too early to tell. Facebook's only been around for 8 years. We have a motto in the company which is only 1%. We're only 1% done. Facebook in 2 years' time, or by the time of the next general election in the UK, will look completely different to what it looks like now. We'll be much bigger. We'll have much more functionality on it. I can absolutely see the day when we move. Not only do we have people who are able to register to vote via an app on Facebook, but people can vote on Facebook. Why not? If you can be authenticated that you are that person, why can't you vote? Much more effective than having everybody troop into a polling booth or a polling station on that day. So I don't see why we should think to ourselves that that the Facebook and Twitter we see now and other social networks that are available are how it's going to be by 2015. It could be completely different. Why not make that part of the next manifesto? That we really want to engage people, we'll let them vote in a completely different way than the current way of doing it. So it's up to politicians to be imaginative about that.
Because we've got to deal with the fact they don't want to vote first. It doesn't matter how many different ways you give them an opportunity to vote, if they don't see that there's a purpose or an efficacy to it, they ain't going to use them, and that's the thing we've got to crack. I wish it was just about.
Yeah, but we do see much greater engagement when in some of your states they have this I voted app. So when people have voted, they will put on their Facebook says I voted, and that encourages other people to vote. So I don't think we should give up on it. I mean, I agree with you. We should, absolutely, it's not the platform won't deliver it, but it's all about how the fact that this is how people are conducting much of their lives, and we're not allowing them to do a fundamental thing when it comes to democracy in the same way. Why don't we?
Yeah. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, but you have to recognise the cat has no skin.
Phil.
Sorry, just to keep that one going then. I'm sort of with Simon in that, just in my head, if you could just vote on Facebook, I mean, surely that would be so
Why don't we
easy.
just get drunk and vote? It's not more ridiculous.
It would have to significantly. But I just
you
wanted
could do
to say,
that now. You could walk into a polling station drunk and vote for somebody ridiculous.
I normally vote in the morning, so I'm only slightly drunk.
so if it was possible, if we had a fraud solution for that, would Facebook do that? Do you think? Would they?
I think it's, look, the platform is there, and we have an authenticity principle. Having talked to the people who run the voter registration system, and learned about how easy it is to fake that, I think, frankly, much harder to do that on Facebook. And our authenticity will get greater over time. So I don't see any reason why not. But it really would be up to you'd have to change the law, electoral law. But those things are there to be changed, right? So why not? Why not? I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect you could do it. And Facebook's an open platform, so you could do it now. Yeah, absolutely, you could do it now. It's not for Facebook to do it; it's for other people to use the platform to do it.
Don't you think there's a risk that in some countries you'll end up having more Facebook users than voters?
No, look, you may do in terms of fake accounts, but I think there are ways in which you can authenticise that.
And does anyone else have any questions? Gentleman in front.
Hi, Adrian Heffernan, Bedfordshire. I guess I'm a bit of a dinosaur, Simon, as much as that I'm not on Facebook and Twitter. But I was interested when you said 32 million people. It's incredible. I know my son and my daughter. How, if I were to go on it, what would be the benefits other than just describing what I had for toast or breakfast?
I'm sure you have a much more interesting life than that. I don't know your constituency that well to know quite what else is going on there. But the key thing about it, and most people who've got a reasonable number of friends, you've got to have a reasonable number of friends to make Facebook worthwhile, will find that actually, not only are they finding out about things they would not otherwise find out about, often some things are quite harrowing, so I don't know whether people watching the news last night, but the news about the poor girl who's been abducted in Mukunda. A lot of people were saying they found her.
No, the 5-year-old.
The 5-year-old. They found out about it on Facebook. So actually, for a lot of people, this is how they found out about what's going on in the world. I'm sure you're very well connected, and maybe you don't think you need to do that. But finding out about what's going on in the world from your friends and people you know and people you trust may be a more authentic experience than other ways you find out about it.
And can we just have 2 more questions?
And it's free.
People are willing to ask
and always will be.
And then we can all go and watch Ed. Gentleman with his hand up. Does anyone else want to ask a question? This is your last chance.
Okay, this is mainly for Stella. So I think all the campaigns you do are really, really great, but I wonder, as a party member, as a party member, but also someone who works for charity, do you think the party really gets digital campaigns well enough yet? I mean, I think, stuff, like you mentioned Cody before, like, I can't imagine, I mean, there's a lot of problems with that intellectual content and stuff, but I can't imagine the party right now doing anything that reaches that kind of level of impact.
I don't see this, it's like all campaigning, and I always talk about it being like spaghetti sauce, and we have different varieties of spaghetti sauce because there's no one type of spaghetti sauce that absolutely everybody wants to buy. And if we keep thinking that we've got to have a particular way of working, we miss all the other people we could be engaging if we had different types of spaghetti sauce. So it's the kind of lesson from marketing. There's a plurality of perfections. It's the same online and offline. So what works in Walthamstow would not work in, rural Gloucestershire. Would not work. It's to do with context, to do with purpose. But purpose is the one constant thread that goes through. So as much as people want to say, you do great things, I disagree with Mark, actually. I don't think my legal loan shark campaign is successful because I haven't changed the law yet. And ultimately, that's the metric by which I judge it. It's not have lots of people signed up and lots of people retweeting. That helps us get there, but that's the purpose of it. So thinking that, I'm no more of an exemplar on this than I am of kind of local community campaigning. I have done different things and I've tried to do different things, because I have people in Walthamstow who like plain and spicy and and pesto. So you have to work in those different ways, and the risk is that we keep trying to replicate models rather than getting that concept of purpose and helping you as a member think about how you can use it and how you can do it.
Sorry, can I just briefly come back? Just like, I take your point, but I suppose I would point to a lot of national organisations who want to do different things on the grassroots level. Say Oxfam, for example, so they want to do things with Oxfam North West, with Oxfam South East, whatever. So they have an adaptability because they understand that sense of purpose. They can use digital models at a national level, but also with the flexibility at a local level. And I don't see the party really I think, as you said, we keep trying to copy models rather than really getting it and moving forward.
Yeah, and we're not Oxfam, we're not 38 Degrees, and we shouldn't try and be such.
No.
I mean, we do work in different ways. Actually, the lessons I learned were from being involved in Scouting, which was a big voluntary organisation working at a local and a national level, and how you got people involved, not just saying, yeah, I support you, that's easy to do, or even sending an email, that's easy to do. It's actually the deep engagement that you want to be able to do.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Policy Exchange for hosting. It's been incredibly interesting.
And I do encourage everyone to, I'll give you an exclusive, but because of being involved on Twitter, I got to know Dave Gedge, and for those of you who don't know Dave Gedge, he is the rock god who created the wedding present, and as a result of being engaged with him on Twitter, I've written the sleeve notes for the new re-released The Sea Monsters album. So don't tell me that involvement doesn't make a difference.